This is the Agile Uprising Podcast.
I think that when we start recording, like every time I say, welcome to another episode of the Agile Uprising Podcast, I always feel like an imposter. Because because it's not the voice that people are used to. Like there's one voice, you know, we're recording, right? But like for listeners, like when you think of welcome to another episode or welcome to an edition of the Agile Uprising Podcast, you always expect to hear, I'm your host, Jay Hrscko.
Yeah,
right?
I guess, unfortunately, yeah.
There's really like, I mean, over the years now, you were one of the first voices, but you weren't one of the only voices. You know, Walker did just as many of those in the very beginning because, you know, he hugs everybody in public like a weirdo, right? And has weird fandom obsessions with people. But you know, for everybody listening, right, there is really one voice that you're used to hearing for darn near 4.5 years. In sometime this year, it will be 5 years. You all have become so incredibly accustomed to hearing, I'm your host, Jay Hrscko.
Oh, God bless him. My mom always said I have a face for radio, but yeah,
You don't have much of a face for anything, but I mean, it's the face we know, right? Like
I guess it's
you know, for those that
familiarity.
have been the video podcasts or you know, or whatever, or those that have jumped on to record with us. So folks, we have something special this week. I'm Chris Murman, and you've been listening to Jay Hrscko's voice. But I would beg that most of you don't really know shit about him. He's just the guy that you're used to listening to. He doesn't, because he plays host so very well, and I step all over him when I'm on the podcast because I try to help host so that he doesn't feel like has to like defer to people and I can help him talk or whatever. And half the time it just comes out clunky, but this isn't about me. But Jay is so very giving when he hosts. He doesn't really give a lot of himself other than the mountains of books and knowledge that he kind of slides in, like, you know, slyly or whatever. So we're gonna paint a canvas of one Jason Hrscko. So it's just me and him one-on-one. Jay, what's up, man?
Life is good. Well, as good as it can be in this new world of whatever the hell it is. I mean, I've always looked at myself as a cynic, as a pessimist, but I've come to realize that I'm actually more of an optimist. And I guess it's because maybe it's laziness or whatever, but I kind of do see the silver lining in just about anything. And I think that, yeah, we've been locked in the fucking house coming up on a year. It's amazing. My wife, you know, well, we'll get to that later. I haven't had a steak knife buried in my chest, so that's a win. I'm gonna put that in the W column. But yeah, man, life is as it is. I mean, I don't have much to complain about. It could always be worse. We'll put it that way.
You may have had a steak knife hovering above your chest, but it's never been buried, right? Like,
yeah, I've definitely left it. I've definitely left a steak knife out on the counter with a Post-it that says "Use this one" before I went to bed.
Right.
And the fact that I woke up without it buried in my chest, I guess was the luck of the draw.
In case of emergency, break Jay.
Yeah, basically.
So it's funny, you just said that. You said, I've always thought of myself as a negative person. I don't necessarily think you're negative. I've always just seen you as a cynic, right? Like, yeah, you are one of the most cynical people I've ever, and I, to the point where those in your fellow Philly and North Jersey compatriots, I just think it's a part of living in that shithole of an area.
I won't take umbrage with the usage of shithole, but it is a almost geographic and environmental offshoot, right? Like there is a snarky, there's a snarky, almost insulting type of demeanor that follows most people in the tri-state area around. You know, funny anecdote with that. When I went to pick up our last puppy, you know, I flew out to meet the breeder who's out of Seattle. And, my wife met her before I did the year prior, and she was actually terrified to meet us. And her exact remarks were she was born in San Diego. She grew up in the Pacific Northwest. And she was convinced that all the people that came from this area of the world are assholes. And we were just going to show up and be mean. And it's, I can't say it's you're painting with a broad brush, but I can't say it's an unfair characterization, because I have more friends that are obnoxious than not. And it's, look at what you think of when you think of the tri-state area. You think of President, Cheeto Mussolini. You think of The Sopranos. You think of these caricatures where you're like, The Real Housewives of New Jersey. God, I can't believe I mentioned that. You think of these characters, and yes, Jersey Shore, right? It's a caricature, but I hate to say it's the truth that it represents a large part of the population. It is.
Oh my God. This is going to be, I'm already having a ball and we just got started. Okay. So let's kind of backtrack, and I don't want to do AU navel gazing. I want to do, but there will be some AU navel gazing here. And this is great because there's a lot of listeners that don't know a ton about our history. They didn't go all the way back to the manifesto, project that we came up with, or you all came up with. I joined after the fact. So who did you, well, I guess, what did you do? How did you get into IT? Before this whole Agile thing came in? Because I know that we've all got a complicated history. So what was yours, right?
So my first job out of college, I was selling subprime mortgages. Cue the laughter from the studio audience.
I opened your LinkedIn page.
I know, I got the notification. And I was selling. So here's the thing, though. I was doing subprime mortgages before subprime mortgages were a bad thing. They were truly for people who had bad credit, no credit. And I'll remember the first loan I closed was for a borrower in upstate New York, somewhere in the Hudson Valley. He was on fixed income, so permanent disability, Social Security income. And I did a 240, 360 balloon with a 5-year prepay, 8% and 2 points. And this is in 2000, which is with a DTI, which is debt to income ratio of 56%. So that meant 56% of his gross income was going towards bills. I went in the bathroom and I was nauseous afterwards. I'm like, I can't sell this. And good salesmen, they like what they sell. If you don't like what you sell, you're going to fail.
Sure.
So I bombed out of the sales piece, but I ended up doing vendor coordinating, right? Appraisal, title, flood, that sort of stuff. Because again, this is late 90s, early aughts. This is, ninja loans are coming out of nowhere. Piggybacks, 80-20 piggybacks, 80% on the first mortgage, 20% on the second of the home's value. We were getting away with murder. So I ended up in a department that was doing appraisal, title, flood. I bounce around. I end up at this one company that needs to build a custom ERP system. And we go with a local vendor. And I just happened to hit it off with the guy who was my quasi project manager, who, long story short, John Biles, shout out to John, he ends up becoming the COO, right, of this mom and pop IT company. So at one point I end up reaching out to him. I took a class in mastering project management from Villanova. I've got my master's certification, all that sort of stuff. And I reached out to him and said, I want to get into project management because I find IT fascinating. And he said, okay, well, and unbeknownst to me, they did some conversations behind the scenes. They reached out to the owner of my current company and they said, are you going to, Jay's reached out to us because he wants to make a career change. We don't want to ruin a relationship. Are we going to step on toes? And the owner of my company was magnanimous. I said, no, that's fine. So long story short, that's how I ended up in IT. I came in as this green behind the ears PM at a mom and pop shop in South Jersey. And it's taken on a life of its own since. I was attracted to the complexity of it, I think. Because you can't just boil it down to, it's not just a fucking appraisal order, right? I don't just request, I want to appraise Murman's house at 1-3 Anytown Street. I'm looking for $200,000. It comes in at 170. Oh shit, we got to redo the loan, right? Like I get all that stuff. And that's how I met my wife. My wife does mortgage processing. But it was something completely new and not something I never even studied in college. I will admit I took MIS in college. I failed the first one because I never went to class. And then I took it the second time and I passed it. But that's how I made my bones in IT. Bouncing around is like, go I'm a big believer in doing what needs to be done, right? Don't let your title get to your head.
Sure.
Don't let your salary band get to your head. I was PMing, I was project coordinating, I was doing manual testing, and my
Right.
first job, not only were we PMs, we were our own BAs, we were our own QA, and we dealt with the clients. So I was actually giving estimates out and working out like the financial details of the project I'm going to be building for you. So I couldn't, I look back at it and I couldn't have asked for a better entry level experience into IT.
So the maxim I always live by is that your title and your salary don't matter if you feel like there's purpose, like you feel useful, you feel like you're doing something in the day. And that role, I mean, that's why many of us, I remember when I was a QA lead, the very first thing I thought was like, if I could just ever get to the point where I was a project manager, I will have made it, right? That because there's so much wrapped up in that role that is still desired today by PMO organizations.
Yeah.
That you feel like if I get this, I'm actually making a difference in people's lives. People report to me. People say yes, sir, and what can I do for you? And maybe you can lead a PMO organization. Many of us have had that.
Yeah, there's an intrinsic motivation that comes in. That's how you can tell true IT professionals from people who are they're punching a clock to do a job, right? There's an internal motivation that comes with just seeing something done well. I mean, I remember when I left this mom and pop shop, I ended up at a large international bank in their credit card arm. And I was a lowly contractor BA, so I was nobody of importance, right? But I got the systems, I got the stuff they were talking about, and not only was I a lowly BA, I was working in the collections and fraud department, right, which is notoriously difficult. Notoriously, there's minute details that need to be perfect. All your I's are dotted, T's are crossed, especially when you're collecting money, right, from people who can't afford to pay. But I just, okay, I'm curious. Well, let's try this. And I remember weekends as a contractor BA where they had to get approval for me to come in on the weekend, and we were getting ready for a major, it was part of the Credit Card Act, the UDAP and the whatever that's called now, not Graham Leach Bliley, that's Glass-Steagall repeal, Dodd-Frank was part of all that reform in the early aughts. And I remember getting approval to come in on the weekend because they said, well, Jay wrote all the test cases. He understands how this should be working. Let's come in and do it. And I learned how to, do the desktop system and all that. It's just, you can always tell when people are just like, well, okay, I don't know, but I'll learn. And if I have someone come to me and say, well, I don't know, but I'll learn, to me, that's a blank slate at that point. Let's run with it.
Yep. I prided myself on all you have to do is show me how to do it once. And then I will then do it faster and more efficiently than any of my teammates. And that's how I got by,
Right.
And then they're like, what else you got? Kind of a thing. That's how any of us get anywhere, is like you handle the base expectations flawlessly. And then they say, what else you got? It doesn't matter, whatever you're doing, kind of a thing. Right. So, all right. So you come in the good old fashioned route of
project manager.
And you just alluded to doing some BA work. You're kind of part of the whole life cycle of things from like a leadership perspective. So when did you realize it was all bullshit?
So I ended up leaving the bank as a contractor. This is right in 2008, 2009, when the economy goes to shit. I was nervous because I was a contractor at a credit card company. Right. And here we have the great economic downturn. Nobody wants to call it Depression 2.0, but it was depression. So I got a full-time job over at Comcast, working with a developer who I worked with at the mom and pop shop, who went over there and he connected me. And the hiring manager, this guy named Rich, I still talk to Rich occasionally. We're still friends on Facebook. Like he was a good boss. He was a great guy. And we were working on all internal stuff. And seeing IT at a company of that size, like the mom and pop, the mom and pop shop is one thing, right? Finance, credit cards, you're an international arm of a UK based bank. It's another thing, but working at Cabletown, right? 1701 JFK Boulevard in Philadelphia, right? Like you're in the belly of the beast. You realize it's like, not for nothing, but we're kind of inefficient. And here's where, and your question of when did I know it was bullshit? Here, I'll give you a perfect example. Every week I had to write a status report. You remember, this is PM. You write a status report. We are this color, blah, blah, blah. And it had to be X amount of characters. It was like fucked up Twitter before Twitter. And I would send that to my boss. who would redact it to the things that he thought, or for the multiple projects I had like 5 to 7 projects. He'd cut that back to what he thought was important, who would then go to his boss, who'd cut it back, who'd go to his boss and cut it back. And then this enterprise project status report would come out once a week. And I'd look at it and I was like, well, what the fuck is this? This isn't anything that I wrote. They didn't even plagiarize it, right? Like the wholesale replacement of words, all that sort of stuff. So, and that was when I was realized, like, you know what? A lot of this
Why are all these colors on the report?
A lot of it is a shell game. A lot of it, it's the watermelon, right? It's red on the outside. It's green on the outside. It's red on the inside. And I thought to myself, nobody's telling the truth. Nobody's telling the truth. And
Nothing
because
to see here.
Yeah, because nobody's telling the truth. I mean, we're going to just keep going the way we're going. And, Comcast prints money. Let's be honest here. They print money. But I'm like, it's kind of disheartening. It's kind of disheartening to see how the sausage is made. And you're like, you kind of expected more from that. So,
well, that's
where I started to realize that, yeah.
When there's so much meat on the bone, when there's nobody even sees any fat laying around on that, like there's tons of funding for things, like there's no need for innovation, there's no need for efficiency, there's no need for, you might have like a program that's over budget, and so they're like, oh, we have to do this or this, but they always find money, right? It was why all of the, the heyday of ESPN, they were just handing out shows left and right to people. Who cares if it got canceled? They were printing money with all the subs, with all of the, because cable was the only way that you were going to watch any of the stuff that you wanted to watch, right? The only way you were going to get ESPN was to pay Comcast, right? And this is before, broadband became universal, right? And so, like, who cares, right? Like there's always, there's no need to improve anything. There's no need for, which is why everybody always is like, why did the manifesto get written in 2001? Why the fuck do you think it got written in 2001? Because all of a sudden nobody had money to waste anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it was the turn of the century. You had the .com crash was in 2000, 2001. Things got a little hinky. And there were a lot of practitioners. One thing I will say that I've learned is for the magnanimous 12 or 17, however many those guys, all white guys, right? We'll talk about that later. Yes. Signed the manifesto. There were tons of people in that orbit that were all thinking and doing the same things. They just didn't have a name for it yet. People like the Poppendicks, people like Peter Merrill, people like Craig Lorman, people like what's her name? Esther Derby and Johanna Rothman and Joshua Karievsky, Adkins, right? All these people saw it. It's just these guys were lucky enough to seize on it and put a name on the movement. The name, which I would argue is probably let past its course due to semantic diffusion, but it was time.
We don't need to start a religious war on this podcast.
I mean, let's be honest. But I mean, I had a conversation this morning. I actually got to interview Jonathan Rasmussen, the author of The Agile Samurai and Competing with Unicorns. I'm looking forward to that episode. He's a great guy. But he even made the remark. He said, because he asked me some questions about where our group comes from, and I started talking about, like we all met at a cocktail hour, blah blah blah. I glossed over the really good details. And I said, we didn't want to be tied to a particular methodology, a particular framework, any of that. We just wanted to advance the craft. And he said to me, towards the end of the aughts, 2010, 2011, whatever, he said, I noticed that these types of conversations, the conversation you're looking to have, started to fall by the wayside. And it was more people trying to sell things than it was people looking to honestly turn them, like you said, turn the mirror back on ourselves and look and reevaluate. And I thought that was really interesting and kind of sad. Truthfully, it's kind of sad, but it's very telling is, it's like anything else with entropy, right? You need to consistently improve and learn, or it's going to slowly fall by the wayside. And I thought but he was around. Jonathan was around at that time. They didn't have a word for it. They were doing, XP and iterative development and all that sort of stuff. He's a very early mobile guy. So
Jeff and Ken were doing their thing, and Kent Beck was off. Like, I mean, he was making acolytes all over the place, and Martin Fowler was it just goes to show. There are people that are invited to the cool kids table, and there are people that don't. And some of it is completely random, and some of it is not. And it's really not up for us to nitpick any of those things. All of it is to say, like, then let's pull you in. Let's pull you in. Let's pull you in, right?
You're right. It's part random. It's part luck. It's chance. It's being in the right place at the right time, getting the right email. And I don't begrudge, 19 white dudes in a snow ski lodge, right? I mean, well, what a surprise. Yeah. I don't begrudge that at all. But again, a lot of that, I mean, Nassim Taleb talks about, the historical narrative that we build for ourselves. Like a perfect example, you talked about LinkedIn before we started recording. Your resume. If I bring Chris Murman in and I sit him down in front of me and I have his resume up and I say, Murman, tell me the Murman story. And just like I'm doing now, I'm going to create a narrative. I'm going to create a narrative that fits all the facts. Is that necessarily objective truth? Well, no, there is no such thing as objective truth. If you disagree with me, find me on Twitter. Let's have this argument. But we create a story that validates that. And that's a part of it. And right, wrong, or indifferent, it's through our frame and our lens. That's how we saw it.
Yeah, and there is something to be said for getting a say in how your story is told, right?
True.
And we're fortunate in that, right? I mean, like, here's the thing: the word privilege is used and taken a lot of strange ways these days, especially with all of the various topics and all of the various politics that are associated with it. But really, at its basis form, all that privilege means is I recognize that I earned some things, and I recognize that I didn't earn some things. Right. And it's okay to say, like, whether you believe in a higher power and say that it's part of a plan, or whether it's purity, luck, and scientific, like, good stuff's got to happen to someone. Today it was just me kind of thing. Regardless, privilege is just recognizing there's things that were in my control and not in my control. And also, what control do I have to bring someone else in, right? Someone brought, you mentioned two different people so far in this story of yourself, of people that saw something in you, right? So, several people, I can point to specific people that saw something in me and said, I need you to be here for it. The whole reason why I'm in this industry, like the reason why I can call myself an Agilist or a whateverist that I am, is because someone said, hey, I need some help and I feel like you can help. And then I just said, well, great. How do I start telling my story? Right. Somehow I got lucky enough to get chosen. People want to start hearing more of my story. All of a sudden, I'm getting interviewed by Colleen on a member spotlight, which was a board spot interview kind of a thing. And then before I know it, I'm getting invited to And
but you're right, though. It is. Yeah. It truly is opportunity. It's someone sees something, and that's why I think we'll talk about my thoughts on the group as a whole later. My boss at the bank, shout out to Joe Walsh. I worked for him as a contractor. I was two levels below him, I think. I left, I went to Comcast. And when I started getting the itch to get out of Comcast, I texted him and I said, hey, I'm thinking about coming back out in the market. You got anything for me? He called me right back and said, I got something for you. When are you coming? I got this, I got this, I can bring you in a full time, blah, blah. And we ended up working together for, God, I think it was like 3.5, almost 4 years before I left there. And yeah, we had differences of opinion, and there were times where we were ready to choke each other, but he gave me the opportunity, and for that I will forever be grateful. And I think that is the biggest gift that we as professional, as not even agile people, right? Just as professional employees, the biggest gift we can give someone else is a chance. Give them a chance, because some of the greatest tragedies in life are unmet potential, unobserved, unrecognized brilliance, right? Those are things where people have it in them, and you just got to find a way to poke to unlock it and let them go. And I will say I've been privileged. I'll use that word, and blessed, and higher power existence notwithstanding, I've been blessed to have that opportunity. And that's why I want to turn around and give it back to other people and help other people come along with me.
Yeah, well, and that plays out in our story the last year as you've welcomed more from Discord into our fold in the podcast. You've been one of the first people that's like, you joked with me. You're like, listen, we don't have to be the ones to do all the work, right? Like, there are other people wanting to do work with us that want to row with us, kind of a thing. Let's pull them in. And I'm like, really? I don't know. Like, John Schneider, that guy, really?
I knew that shot was coming. I was waiting for it to come. But
kidding.
But to your point, but to your point. So I was thinking about this before we started recording. you know, we've discussed in other channels, I'm a big music fan, right? And obviously I'm an IT guy, so I like extreme music. It's heavy metal, it's hardcore punk, that sort of stuff.
That's putting it lightly.
Yeah, it is
For the record, listening audience, it is putting extremely lightly to say he's into heavy metal.
I've sent stuff to Murman that is, his kids
bang
have
a trash can, and grunt loudly into that trash can. It resembles the music that he listens to.
One of the best things come out of this group is every Wednesday I send Ryan Lockard a new album, and it's usually something that's completely unlistenable. But here's why I bring this up. So if you've ever been to, and Murman, eventually I'm going to get down to Texas and we'll go out and I'll take you to a show. But if you've ever been to like a hardcore show, there is an ethos. There's an expectation that the lead singer's going to get up and they're going to sing. And if there's no barriers, they want you on that stage with them singing. I'll link you a video of an example where the lead singer standing there with the microphone singing, and the entire audience is trying to get on stage and sing with him. That is the best example I can come up with for what I would like, honestly, the Agile Uprising to be, right? There's a singer, but at that point they become inconsequential because everybody is involved, everybody's contributing, everybody's having the time of their lives, and they're creating memories that they can walk away with. And to me, that would be the coolest thing in the world. Now, granted, you've had people break backs, you've had people pop out, Roger Moret from Agnostic Front broke his spine when they called it a pig pile, piled on top of him. You had another guy, Rob Fusco from Most Precious Blood, blew out his Achilles. But the point being, I don't want to blow an Achilles on anybody, but the point being is this is a microphone where I'm doing something, and I want everybody else in there with me, and I want you all piled on top of me, and I want you to then break off and then go do your own thing or come contribute with us, because it shouldn't just be me. The emphasis shouldn't be on me. The emphasis should be on the experience.
I'm still hung up on the quite Christian sounding band names that you were just referring to.
Dude, I've got a lot of Christian hardcore out there. I mean,
I'm just kidding.
But in all honesty,
I heard the word blood and I was like, oh,
it had a Christian hardcore had a moment in the mid to late aughts. Face Down Records. There was a thing.
Listen, I was raised Southern Baptist. I was not allowed to listen to secular music until I got to high school.
So then you heard it. Yeah. But I mean, I honestly kind of enjoyed it, being as someone who grew up not in a religious household. Any artist that has, and here, let's tie it back to the Agile Uprising, right? Anybody who has something to say and they come from a place of honesty where they're trying to say something, I respect. Even if I don't agree with your there's some militant veganism, right? Militant straight edge. That's part of the music I listen to. That's fine, right? That's fine. But you're espousing a belief that you feel strongly in, and I respect that. I may not agree with it, but I respect that. And I want everyone to feel strongly about what they're doing when they come to get involved with us and contribute.
The interesting piece is everything that you just mentioned also is representative of like this past 12 months with the board. That's kind of borne out extremely with I remember the board meeting when right after the George Floyd thing hit, and all I could do, I was just whipped up into a frenzy. I didn't know what to do, and I was like, we have a voice. We have to say we need to be doing this, and God bless you and Cusack and the others, right? You all kept me calm, and you said, Chris, listen, there's a lot of people putting out a lot of statements here, and everybody's feeling things. There's a lot of feelings. In fact, this past year has all been about like, I feel these things. I some of your messages on Slack have, like you're feeling things. We're all feeling things. And as a board, we had to kind of like tackle them together when really all this is just a group of, we're just I'm not going to call us like a group of like fuck ups or something. Cause we all we have careers. We're successful in a sense of what we do. I think everybody does something I think of merit and value to bring to our industry. But in the end, we think we're just a bunch of regular, Joes and Jolene's kind of trying to, make a safe space.
Muddle through.
Yeah,
we're all trying to
muddling through. But it is interesting that you talk about like, hey, how do I make this space? Right. We've almost been forced to do that in a way. And some weeks our Slack is dead and we're not talking to each other, and others like all we can do is just share stuff back and forth, or it's just moving to Discord kind of a thing. But like it has been an interesting year for us, kind of in that same vein, right?
It really, really has. And I mean, when I go back to the genesis of how this whole group started, right? We were trying to carve out a space for ourselves. And you know, I would be surprised if there's a listener that hasn't heard the story, but in the case they haven't, it came out of the Heart of Agile conference in Philadelphia. It wasn't Philadelphia, it was King of Prussia. Let's be honest here, Valley Forge Convention Center, at a casino somewhere. And you know, I knew Cusack, and I knew James Gifford, and I knew Andrew Leff. I didn't know Leff personally, not like the friends that we are now. I knew him because his fashion sense was terrible. All of his pants were like 3 inches above his ankle, and I used to get in the elevator and pick on him.
It's still not great.
No,
it's
whatever.
Still not great.
No, but hey, he can see his own toes when he stands up straight. I'll give him that much. But I knew these guys almost tangentially, and so when I go there, right, and I know Cusack, and I know Gifford, and I know Leff, and then I meet Andy Clef, and then I meet well, the artist formerly known as Troy. It was Troy plus 300 pounds, not like he looks now. But then I meet Troy, and I meet Lockard, and we all get introduced to one another. And you know, a 4.5 hour happy hour and spilled whiskey shots on the bar floor later, you know, we come to realize that we want our own space. We don't want to be married to a framework or to a practice. We just want to help each other grow, and that's the rather lofty goal we had. But to your point about carving out a niche, that's what we were really trying to do, was let's find something for ourselves,
right,
to represent what we think and what we are. And that's where the whole manifesto, you know, this is, you know, vintage Lockard. I'm still pissed that he stepped down. I don't think he ever should have. This is where Lockard comes in, right? Finding all the manifesto signers and lining them all up. And, you know, Mike McCalla, who was around for the early days, right? He does Lean Agile Intelligence. Check that product out. You know, he was involved as well. I mean, we've had a lot of interesting, Rob Ligeti, who I still speak to fairly frequently. We have a lot of interesting people come through. And I think that everybody contributes something. It's finding what that something is and using it to the best of your ability.
Yeah, no, and for those that don't know, like, so you knew Lockard, I mean, not Lockard, but you knew Giff and Cusack from some of your previous work, right? When you first got started. In fact, wasn't Cusack like the first person, like, was he coaching
tells
you,
that story
se?
Where I was angry about an agile transformation. I wasn't angry, and I was doing, but I will cop to, I was doing shots of Old Crow in the stand-up.
Yeah.
But I quote him all the time. Like, he was the guy who really helped me turn the corner, where and he was great with being able to pull him aside and ask him questions. And I was pulling him aside and I was picking his brain about something. And we were going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I think I was starting to get, if I remember the story correctly, I was starting to get frustrated. And he said to me, Jay, I don't have all the answers and you don't have all the answers, but we're going to learn them. We're going to find them together. And you know, it sounds like all dramatic, and that's where in the movie, like, this is where
Jesus, Yoda.
This is where Brad Pitt, who's playing me, like, makes the third turn in the movie. It wouldn't be Brad Pitt; it would be Fat Jonah Hill. But we'll come back to that. Who holds the record for the actor who cursed the most? Anyway, that's where I finally realized that, okay, so we're gonna figure it out. And that was, for me personally, that was a big door opening for me. It's like, well, you know, fuck it. You don't need to know everything. You're just going to have to figure it out, and you need to be comfortable with figuring it out.
I always think Cusack's persona is like someone who spent the first 15 years of their life watching Roadhouse weekly.
So he's the cooler. He's Dalton.
He's Dalton, right? He's built like a fridge, right? So he's like, imagine a fridge of a man who's Dalton. Like, that is Cusack.
I'm just trying to imagine him talking to a whole room of coaches and saying, be nice until it's time to not be nice. How will we know when that is? Well, I'll tell you, right? But I mean, it's all serendipity. Like, I was lucky enough to meet these guys and fall in with a bunch of great people. And then after that event, you know, I go out to lunch one day because I'm in the city at this point. I'm working at my current employer. And I meet up with Andy Clef, Lockard, and I think it was McCalla at that point. We all had lunch together at some brew pub in Philly.
Elbow Pads was there?
Yeah. Hey, Mike McCalla. I miss him. I miss Mikey. I do.
I miss that dude.
But that's where it all kind of came from. And then when I stop now and I look back, like, so let's get a little bit navel gazing, right? When I stop and I look back and I look at what we've built, right? a podcast that's going on for almost 5 years, a Discord server where we literally have an international footprint. I mean, we have Agile practitioners who probably would never have given me the time of day because they don't even know who I am, ringing us up and saying, hey, I want to come on the show. And then when they come on the show, they say, oh, this is the Agile Uprising, so I could be myself, right? That's the biggest, not even really compliment, but affirmation that I could possibly ask for, right?
Yep.
Is we have created something out of nothing that hopefully will outlive us all, right? Will outlive us all, hopefully.
We've had luminaries open up in a way they've never done before, right? We've had, I have people that connect with me on LinkedIn that just say, hey, I love the podcast. I'm like, great. Was I on it? I don't know. I mean, whatever. Sure.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, look at we have, I mean, and I'll use this example because they're the big dog in the space. We've had Dean Leffingwell on twice. And both times we've reached out to him, he replies very quickly. And he says, yeah, okay, I'll come on. And we give him the agenda beforehand. And the first time me and Leff were fucking nervous. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. We were nervous, right? This is the big dog right here, right? And he was cordial and he was friendly and funny and he was very engaging. And one of the most flattering things he said to us after the recording was he said, I really appreciate you guys I really appreciate the questions you guys asked me because I could tell you weren't just looking at the picture and trying to get someone to explain safe to them. You actually dug into the material and came out with an observational question. And I mean, where else could I find that, right? Like I emailed Johanna Rothman all the time. We were going back and forth this morning, right? Like you're gonna
she is completely herself, right?
Yeah.
She is her full authentic self on the podcast in a way that same thing.
It's wild.
Same thing with Lisa and Kilby and
Jason Little and Joshua Karyevsky. They're themselves. And that's
Little shows up just to what he did
Heckle.
for the WTF series. Like he basically he didn't heckle us. Usually, so Little uses Twitter to heckle Lockard, and he used the podcast to heckle 2020, right? So it's like,
right.
And sometimes he heckles the industry, right? Because maybe we deserve to be.
We deserve it. I mean,
we kind of need to make fun of ourselves a little bit.
If anything, Murman, we are the irreverent voice. We're the id behind the scenes, which is sitting there talking, and you can't. It's the lizard brain, and you can't shut it up. But it's sitting there and it's talking. And when
we're the voice telling you that's stupid.
Yes,
you should raise your hand. That's stupid.
It
doesn't make sense.
I mean, I remember when I got to talk with Jorgen Hesselberg from Unlocking Agility. Man, it must have been like 4 a.m. his time. He's in Norway. We went in on Depeche Mode. Like we went in on Depeche Mode after the recording ended, right? Like to the point where we got disconnected. We both caught back in, and like it provides an avenue, right? Like everybody provides value of some sort, and I love the fact that we've created a platform who, if you have something to say, come find us, and 9 times out of 10 we're gonna have you on, and we're gonna have an interesting conversation. And we're all trying to carve out at the end of the day, we all want the same things, right? We all want to take care of our families. We want to lead a meaningful life. We want to be able to ride off into the sunset and say, yeah, I left my mark somewhere, and my mark not being like, fucking H-bombs or something totally terrible, right? Like, that's what we all want. And if we can provide a way to give everybody that 15-minute opportunity, God bless us, right? Like that's all we can hope for.
Yeah. So give me something that happened like in the first few years. Like what was like the first, when was the time that you can remember saying, are we going to keep doing this? Like, is this still going to be a thing? Like, is this like, are we going to let this die, or like, what is this thing here? Do you just like, is there a moment that sticks out in your mind?
I don't know if I could remember the exact time, but it was, we spun this thing up, and it started as a Slack channel amongst us. And then it became a discourse, I think is the actual product, the message board. And then that was going, we had a whole bunch of people pile in, and then that started to taper off. And then we spun up to Discord. Troy had been banging on about it for a while. Me and him finally stood it up. And
I didn't install it for months because I thought,
nobody
this
did.
Is dumb. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it for whatever reason, it caught fire. But there was definitely a point where it seemed like our, and I'm going to open the kimono and just say it, right? It seemed like our board meeting attendance bottomed out, right? It was the same 5 people in a board full of 10, or 12, or how many we were up to at one point. It seemed like it was the same 4 people doing the same 4 things. And I kind of started to wonder, does this thing have legs? Right.
Right.
And it was probably right around the time that the Discord server was very, very nascent. Right. So it just started and there really wasn't the representation that it has now. And that was to me where I was like, I don't know where this is going. And then, and I've had some conversations with myself where I said, I enjoy doing this. I enjoy hosting. I enjoy talking to these people. At this point, I've learned enough and know enough that I think I can hold my own. Shout out to Karen Martin. She doesn't know this, but she was my first solo interview. I was as nervous as a whore. I was sweating like a whore.
Get on it, and I had to skip out on that.
I was sweating like a whore in church. I would admit it. I'm a fat guy, so I sweat in the shower anyway, but it was bad.
She's a star.
No, she's awesome. She's awesome. But I thought to myself, you know what? I think I could let me just have a go and keep it going and see what happens. And now we've reached that interesting, I won't say weird, interesting inflection point where you see more people coming out of the Discord server with ideas for shows who we're going to host, right? You see more people saying, well, I'll contribute. I'll do this. I'll do this. I'll do that. Like the AU boot camp. When are we going to start talking about that? So, I mean, I think it's turned a corner, but there was definitely some times where I thought to myself, I kind of feel like it's a one-man show and I don't want it to be all about me because I want it to be bigger than me. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And I don't know if that's my ego talking, but it's got to be more than me. Right. And if I get to be the voice, that's fine. But
you were certainly the one putting the work in. So I don't think that's your ego talking. I think that's like, you're just speaking to the fact that I'm doing the work. And there's a lot of last year that I'm like, man, I'm just maintaining, bro. I don't. Well,
last year was a tough year for everybody, and I can't put that against anybody. I mean,
I'm just saying, I'm not saying that wasn't the case. I'm just saying you took that and you kept us going. That's not the right reason why I had this podcast, just to say thank you, Jay. But it is a big deal. So we haven't touched on the fact that you have to attend every single training class of every single certification.
So let me explain that. That's a good question. It's a good question.
Okay.
Let me explain that. So why does Jay take all these certs? Is he trying to
read every goddamn
one
book.
cert to rule them all? So it's part of it's a two-headed monster, right? So anything my job will pay for, I will take. It's fair enough. If my job says, we're going to give you a fucking certification in underwater basket weaving, I'm going to take a certain underwater basket weaving because this is something new to learn. So that's part of it. The other part of it is I truly enjoy the act of learning, and I enjoy the more let's put it this way, the more I learn, the more I realize how dumb I am, and there's way more to learn. So it almost becomes this repeating circle. So like all the safe stuff, well, 9 times out of 10, my job pays for that. So if you're going to offer a safe course, even in a role that I may not necessarily currently be filling, I'm genuinely curious. I want to go take it. But I'm also, if I'm going to be completely honest, I'm mostly interested in the weird stuff. And by weird, I mean stuff that's not necessarily mainstream. For example, the Peter Merrill's X-Scale class, one of the best classes I've ever taken, right? That I could send my exam. Our exam was absolutely brutal. It was 90 something questions. We got like a 74 on it. So we barely passed it. 76. We barely passed it. The stuff I've been taking with Mike Burrows and Agenda Shift, right? Not mainstream. Everybody's yelling over the mountains. But when I get in the classes, I'm like, well, shit, there's a lot of applicability here. So to me, It's just, the brain is a muscle and you need to exercise it or it's going to collapse. And I'll be honest, when I first fell in with you and this whole crew, I thought I was the dumbest guy in the room. Because I did not have the agile resume, the agile chops that you, Cusack, Andrew Leff, Mike McCall, Troy Lightfoot, Andy Clev. I did not have the same chops. So that's why I started reading, because I like to read and I read fast. And then lo and behold, I start blowing through books. And then it's like, well, we could turn this into a podcast. Let me get comfortable with interviewing people. And part of me, the stuff I still read, part of it is I'm trying to find shows, right? I'm trying to find topics. But the other part of it is I'm genuinely fucking curious. Like what's out there? And that's how they kind of go hand in hand, right? Like I talked to Jonathan Rasmussen this morning, and we talked to Gil Broza last week. A couple weeks ago, Gil was great. We've got I've got the Jim Johnson from the Standish Group, right? The Chaos Report we all quote. I reached out to these people blind and said, "Do you want to come hang out?" And they were like, "Yeah, let's come hang out." So
sure,
it's not that I'm not trying to know everything, but I'm genuinely curious. Part of it is, to your point, driving the show, right? Coming up with new things to talk about. I find things that may interest me, that may interest other people. So I want to have the conversation. But there's another part of it is I always feel like I'm behind, right? Like I've never, I'm going to admit this and somebody's going to come through the fucking screen and punch me. I've never read Reinertson front to back. I've read chunks of it and someone stole my copy. I just bought it again. I think I kind of feel like I need to read that. So I'm going to read it again.
Right.
I've never read The Fifth Discipline front to back. So maybe I should.
You and I read the exact same way. I have chunks of things that matter to me.
Yeah.
Honestly, the only reason why I feel like I found a career is because you don't need to you don't need to explain anything to me. Everything just as the way that I hear it, I'm like, yep, that makes sense. I feel like I either did that or I wanted to do it, but I didn't know what to call it, and now I do. What cracks me up, Jay, is that you're, we all have a bit of imposter, syndrome in us, but you're like, I felt like I was behind. I've never had a single conversation where I felt like I was ahead of you in any sense of the term.
Which is kind of flattering, but kind of scary because I honestly feel like I'm behind you and everybody else. And that's why I keep doing what I do.
It's just different experiences, right? You have a program leadership type role. You're over, you're trying to at your current company, you're trying to spearhead a better way of working, better practices, shipping quality, ship anything, right? I remember, you telling however many days in a row.
1,085.
Have you still not shipped to production?
I have in my current
employer. Or did you
just
shed that work?
I shed the work. I moved on roles, but in my current employer,
right.
I've never been involved in a production deployment of anything.
So for those playing the home game, if you're ever wondering, does that happen? Yes, it does. Right. It's just a matter of it. So the only reason why I do what I do is just because if somebody's like, hey, do you want to try this? Yeah. Do you know how to do it? Yeah. No, I don't.
No.
Sure. Yeah.
Wing
absolutely.
It.
I know how to. Yeah. Have you ever presented this to a client? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
I mean,
just picture everybody naked. It works. And the 1,085 days, everybody can read the details of that when I finally publish my book, A Sprint to Nowhere, where names will not be changed to protect the guilty or the innocent. Everybody's coming out. You're all getting narked out. I may be unemployable going forward, but yeah. It's true, but it's true though. I mean, there is some sense of, I do feel like I'm trying to catch up. Right. And I mean, one of the most flattering things anybody's ever said to me in a professional setting was Claudia made the remark on one of the Discord servers where she said, Jay is like the agile Wikipedia. And at first I was like, I don't know how to take that. But I went, yeah, I guess I kind of am because I read all this stuff and it's,
why do you think when I need to find, when I'm looking for material and anything, why do you think I ping you before if Jay knows where it lives, it exists.
It's out there somewhere.
Yeah, it's got to be somewhere. If you know it exists, it's if it exists, you know it, right? So
true.
You're Agile Google.
Jesus, I should write an Agile wiki. I mean, it's. But I not that I prefer, but I am okay with that passive information induction, right? Where I sit back and I read a book. I just hammered my way through Tame Flow by Steve Tendon. I'm actually talking to him tomorrow to get him on the show. I thought it was brilliant, right? It's all theory of constraints based. Everything is theory of constraints based. I like that stuff. I mean, and I wish I can't wait till we go back to the whole real life conferences, real life meeting people stuff. Cause I can't wait to get back. A little bit of inside baseball for our listeners. Colleen Johnson had me and Gifford lined up to do Mile High Agile in 2020. We were going to wear matching camo pants and hoodies, and we were going to do live recordings, and we were all set, right? We were shipping stuff out there and all that.
Yeah.
And it fell apart, but I'm looking forward to that because that I think is the next for me, but not just for me, for us as a group, right? And I kind of don't like the fact that I'm the face of the group, right? Because I by far think I am the least talented or least what's sort of looking for? Not accessible.
Can you please stop?
Least
you can
appropriate.
Start making fun of yourself when we turn the record button off.
I'm the least appropriate professional. There we go. I'm the least professional.
Well, that's fair. That's to be very fair.
But that's the part I'm really looking for. It's getting back out and running into someone at a conference. I'm going, oh, you're the fucking guy, the obnoxious guy from the Agile Uprising, right? Where you called this person out on their bullshit, right? Like, or Murman was making fun of you. You couldn't get out of the intro. I'm like, yeah, it's, you know.
I do like that I've taken on the character of just annoy Jay, find a way to annoy Jay, and you'll be fine.
I'll be honest, when I have a tough day, I go back and listen to that first unscripted episode, and it does make me laugh. The fact that I wish we had the video recording on of the panel.
No, but we have to put the video of that out someday, because you start where you're like this. It's like you see just the corner of it. Right. And then all of a sudden, and then you go, welcome. And then bam, you lose it.
It was unreal watching Left fall off the couch and all that sort of stuff. Like that was a wild evening. But then again, this is in the middle of a quarantine. We're all locked in the house. We were doing 2 episodes a night. I mean, it was a lot of fun. John Schneider was like, what the fuck are these guys on about?
Yeah. I basically trolled him for 45 minutes.
But I mean, that's one of the better things that's come out of this. And I will always be grateful to Cusack, to Gifford, to everybody, to you, to just have the opportunity, right? Like all it was an opportunity. And I never done any podcasting before this. And I just kind of seized the horns and went with it. And
yeah.
And there you are. I mean, now I do lame new metal stuff, right? Who there was somebody sent me a joke. It was from the Hard Times. It said, a bunch of guys who don't feel comfortable expressing their emotions have started like a bazillion podcasts during the lockdown. And I thought that was kind of funny because I kind of did that exact thing. Now granted, me and my buddy, Tim and I, we talked about doing it for years. So it was just opportune timing, but, I was like, I wanted to tag that Facebook group. I'm in this meme and I don't like it because it was me. It was me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if people are interested, what's the name of that podcast?
So the funny thing is I don't talk about this stuff on when I do the music stuff, but I think it's called New Breed, NU Breed. And this is going to hit a very unique age bracket, but it's anybody who's my age, which is say early 30s to late 40s. This is all the new metal music that came out from, say, the mid to late 90s. So Korn, Limp Bizkit, Deftones, that sort of stuff. I met through interacting with the different hardcore music-based podcasts on Facebook. I ran into one of their hosts, and we had the same interest. And it was, hey, you want to do something? So we talked about it for a couple of years. We never went anywhere, and now it's out there. So we do episodes every other week. And honestly, we barely prep because I know it so well. It's not like this where I'm literally reading like books and notes. And
oh God, you prep for this podcast? Maybe I should start.
You guys have no idea how much work goes on behind. It's more off the cuff, and it's kind of fun because it's relaxing. We do it on a Saturday night. I'm like 6 or 7 beers deep, and we run with
it. We have been going. It feels like we just barely started talking.
True.
So I guess Jay, in closing, I feel like we've been closing for 20 minutes. Do you feel like people know you better? Like if have they painted a better picture of you out of this?
I think so.
This session.
I think they can at least see where I've come from, where my IT chops come from. I mean, if anything, it should tell anybody that even if you're not in IT, there's always a way in. You just got to kind of sort of find it. I mean, I think so. We didn't go into like my personal life or tell me about, what are your turn-ons, turn-offs, all that sort of stuff, like a Playboy Playmate.
Want to know that?
Nobody wants to know that. But I mean, and Murman, I have to publicly thank you for taking the time to do this, because it is kind of nice to not have to be worrying about hosting and to just have a conversation. Where while I love hosting and I love everything that we do in the show, it is kind of nice to just cut loose and just not have to think about how do I transition the conversation from A to B to C to D.
Well, and also at the same time, make you uncomfortable by making it all about you
yes, I don't like talking about myself. I like talking. I don't like talking about myself.
Wait, you think that I didn't know that, and I didn't think I'm gonna make Jay spend an hour talking about himself, which is you've turned it so magnanimously back on the what AU has been and blah blah. Like, listen, everybody, the only person I dislike complimenting I dislike complimenting more than Jay is Lockard, and we're all gonna end up working for his ass someday. So I like.
Can you imagine
what
what that company Christmas party is going to be like?
Can you imagine what that company like weekly town hall is like? Let's let alone like during business hours.
He'll get up and he'll make some remark about, okay, so now we're going to talk about our next quarter's public statement. And in the back, all you're going to hear is take your shirt off. Like it's going to be out of control.
And it'll be him. It'll be him.
Yeah.
I will end by saying, everybody, that there's a reason why we put out content every week. And there's a reason why we have fresh new content. I will give myself the credit that I love coming up with ideas, and I never want to do the work to do it. I'm like, look, here's a fun idea. You all go play with it. And there's one person that's always there, that always does the work, that always cranks out content. And we're gonna, some of us are trying to help out more this year because we don't want to burn you out any more than you got in 2020. But I know Jay to be a giving person. He rarely thinks of himself, and it's somebody that I would have probably never been friends with if I had not been on this board. I'm glad to call Jay a friend. He looks like someone who should get caught by airport security for some strange reason.
I look like the Unabomber's developmentally challenged brother is what I honestly think I look like.
Yeah, like you would qualify for reduced
airfare.
Well, I was gonna say, maybe you just get maybe you qualify for disability, in some way.
Fair enough.
Right, and yet you're 10 times as knowledgeable and smart as the rest of us. And all I will say is that if you get a chance to talk to Jay, if you get a chance to message him on Discord, I am thankful for Jay, and everybody else should be thankful for Jay as well, because if there's a good chance that the podcast you're listening to, not this one, because I'm gonna do the mastering and all the work, but there's a good chance if you listen to something, Jay did most of the work. So thanks, Jay, for all that you do, and hopefully everybody got to know you a little bit better. And I'm glad to be your friend.
Awesome. And same thing, Murman. I look forward to actually meeting you in real life one day.
One of these days.
Someday.
Yes, everybody. We're gonna stop talking now, but this is Chris Murman speaking for the great Jay Hrscko, or Hrscko as he is called on our Slack. We are signing off.